Hi, this is Ken Adams. Welcome to this edition of the 2016 elections. And May 17th is a very important election date. It's a primary date and it really determines who's going to be on the city council and the mayor of Salem. So that's one of the reasons why I've invited various city council candidates and the two mayoral candidates. And with me today is Jan Kailuweit. Did it?
Kailuweit.
Kailuweit. I'm getting there. So, Juan, welcome to the show, and you're running for Ward 1.
Yes.
And that's downtown, a little part of West Salem, and basically the central city.
Yes.
So what made you decide to run?
That's a good question. Thank you, Ken. Thank you for having me. You know, I moved to Salem in '99. I grew up in Germany and came over here to go to college initially in the early '90s. Fell in love with an American girl. And the relationship didn't last, but I'm still here. And after all the traveling I've done in my life, I sort of felt homeless inside, and I made a decision to make Salem my home. I lived here, I might as well belong.
And it feels like home to you now.
It does, it very much does. I became a citizen in 2004, and that's how my journey started. I wanted to get to know my neighbors. I want to be a true local person. I bought a house in the Grand neighborhood. I got a job in walking distance, and that was my journey of becoming a true local Salemite. I joined a neighborhood association, served on the board there for a couple years, and got to know more neighbors, got involved in local issues. And then I was ready to do something a little bit bigger, and I asked one of the councilors, and they thought I would be a good addition on the library advisory board. So I did that. And then a position came open on the budget committee. And that's where I've served the last 5 years.
And that's not usually a job a lot of people are interested in doing when it comes to city government, but it's essential for city government.
I'm a detail-oriented person, and I'm an analyst in my daytime job. So it seemed like a good fit, and I enjoy. Because at the heart of everything we do is always finances, right? There's a lot of services that we would like to deliver, and it all depends on if the funding is there or not.
Well, there is kind of some funding issues coming up here in the city of Salem, and the big one that is being discussed right now was discussed actually last night, was the police facility, proposed police facility. And that's a big commitment, and there's various angles being looked at about how big still they've found a site. So what is your view on what's going on with the Salem police facility and what you would like to see happen?
Well, first of all, there's been a lot of talk, and I've sort of taken it in, but I've never seen the current police facility firsthand. So I thought it would be important for me to see what conditions are like, and I got in touch with the chief and asked if I could have a tour. And that was very eye-opening. I was amazed to find out that I have more showers in my house than the police officers have. The male officers, I did not look at the women's facilities, but the police officers, the male officers only have 2 showers. I have 3 in my house. And so that was, it's a great sound bite, but it was very eye-opening. I work for the state, so I also work in Cube City, lots of cubicles all around. And police officers don't even have their own cubicles. There's many officers who share desks. They share tiny little closets with lots of them. Some officers don't even have enough outlets to recharge the phones that they have to take home. So a new facility is overdue. That's what I wanted to say. And it seems that the current facility was not built with an eye towards the future. I did not live here in the 70s, but I was told that the facility was practically outdated or too crowded within 8 or 10 years.
Well, it is somewhat kind of a bad situation as far as I'm concerned, because the city of Kaiser built a police station with about 1/5 of the police officers that Salem has, and they have an actual larger facility.
Yes. And you know, a facility, a good facility is important because we want our officers to be efficient. We also want them to take pride in where they work and the work they do, and it's an all-around package to me. And so I believe a new facility is overdue, and of course the big question is, how much can it cost, or how much should it cost? The first thing I wanted to say is kudos to the city to recognize that they do not have the expertise in-house. And then they went and found a vendor or a contractor who has expertise in designing police facilities and helping the city. So I think that was a great step in the right direction.
And they still have some other issues, though, to kind of settle. One, the exact size, because the consultants said the 148,000 square feet, which would kind of line up with what Kaiser has if you multiplied it by 5. Roughly, it'd be about equal. But there's some talking about taking the 911 call center out and having that at where it currently is located, off-site. And I guess there's probably some other tweaks. But I mean, that seems to be where they're kind of focusing right now. And there's some discussion about using urban renewal funds for buying the land for the police facility.
Yeah. Well, the big issue, of course, is to make it palatable to the voters, because ultimately the voters decide. And maybe I'm digressing, but I'm thinking of the old City Hall, which was built in 1896, I believe, and then was torn down in the early 70s. And the City Council at the time also looked at, do we want to preserve the old? Do we want to build new? And how much can it cost? And it ended up being cheaper to build new, so they tore the old one down. And in my mind, there's some interesting parallels where money became the ultimate determining factor. And I suppose that's just the way it is.
But they have a campaign to wage once they get the details settled. And that'll probably consume a lot of time. So you'll know at that point whether you're going to be on the city council. But it's kind of a convoluted system where you get elected in May and you don't get seated till the end of the year or beginning of next year. But you can still participate in city government. How?
Well, if elected, until I am elected, and I hope to be elected, obviously I can get involved as a citizen, participate in the meetings, testify. I have one little advantage that I'm possibly a little bit more familiar with the city's budget, since I've served on the budget committee for the last 5 years. There's lots of opportunities also through the neighborhood associations, which traditionally have been the city's way to reach out to neighbors and get input. Our current councilor, Chuck Bennett, faithfully shows up at every meeting, takes input, takes that back to council, and that is a great way to get involved.
So, so that's one of the big infrastructure issues that we have. One of the other ones that, when I was interviewing candidates in 2014, we were discussing the third bridge. And so what is your view on the third bridge?
Well, it seems that the question currently posed is yes or no. There's those folks who say we don't need a bridge, and those folks who say we do need a bridge. Maybe I'd like to propose a slightly different question, and that is, when do we need the third bridge? Because Salem is growing, and there's no stopping. I believe in the 17, 18 years I've lived here, we've increased by 20, 30, 40,000 people, and that's the trajectory we're on. And so the question in my mind is not, do we need a bridge, but when do we need it? We currently have 160,000 people. Do we need it when there's 20,000? 200,000, 250,000, 300,000? At what point does it become a necessity? I do believe it will be a necessity at some point. We may be able to push back the need for bridge by through public transportation, maybe working with the state to stagger the beginning times when employees go to work, because that's the bulk of the people that go over the bridge to go to work, the biggest employer plus the hospital. So maybe there's some fiddling with traffic, but I don't think we can avoid it. So to me, the question is not if, but when.
Okay. One of the other issues that I see that we have is affordable housing. Now, Salem, when you compare it to, say, like Portland and other areas, the prices are reasonable, but we have a shortage of actual places for people to rent. And right now we currently have a deficit of over 6,000 units. And so what would you see your role on the city council as trying to do something about that? Or what should the city's role be in trying to create more housing? And how should they go about it?
That's multiple questions, but they're all good. I am reminded of the last homeless count last year when the folks counted over 1,600 homeless people, some of them entire families, lots of children. So there is definitely a need for housing. I think that's a given. I do believe we all agree on that we need it. I'm very pleased to see that there has been housing downtown. Unfortunately, it seems that is all high-end housing. Several apartment buildings where single bedroom goes for $900 and 2-3 bedrooms go for $1,000, $1,500. That is definitely not affordable, even with vouchers. But even the low-income housing that is available is not sufficient. There are folks who have vouchers, who qualify, but they still cannot find anything. And so I do agree that we need to change that. I also think that the city is on a good trajectory at the moment, and I'm referring to the task force where Salem, Kaiser, Marion, and Polk County have banded together. They've had 2 meetings so far, so it's a little bit too early to tell. But I hope that there'll be some affordable housing recommendations coming out of that. These issues, in my mind, all intertwined. The homelessness, the affordable housing, the mental health, homeless veterans, homeless kids. So there has to be work with the school district, with veterans organizations, with nonprofits. It's a huge task. I do believe there is some incentive that the city can possibly give towards building low-income housing. They can do that through making certain zoning available, possibly some, and I'm not a specialist on that yet, but maybe some tax credits towards affordable housing and or urban renewal funds, or I believe there are several mechanisms that we need to pursue to be able to provide affordable housing.
Because I see that as a critical situation coming. I mean, it's bad enough as it is, but it's only going to get worse unless we step up and start actually producing some results. And there's a lot of studies out there saying this or that, but it's building some more units is one of the prime things. And one of the things that I observed that they used a lot of their urban development monies to build some of these high-end condos here downtown, when you would have thought they would have insisted at least on having some affordable or low-income housing incorporated into that, so that they still make some money on building their units, but then providing some housing at different levels at least. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't do that in the past.
Yes, I hear you. There's a demand for that too. And some units have sold very fast. And that shows that there was a demand for high-end housing as well. And I agree we need to be a little bit more forceful as a city government. And I would also like to see closer cooperation with the nonprofits to accomplish that. I have noticed there's a really good group of nonprofits, whether they're church groups that feed the homeless, or whether they're social groups through the county that help folks get jobs, work on social skills, work on mental health issues. But it appears to me that they all work in their own little world, and there's not a lot of overlap. And so that's why I'm so encouraged with the steps that the city, together with Kaiser and Marion and Polk County, have taken to band together. I would love to see more of that, and not just the government organizations, but also the nonprofits.
maybe some coordination between the various groups.
Yes. And ultimately, government, nonprofit, and you also have to fit in the for-profit sector. You do need their initiative, you need their funding to build housing, and there needs to be a profit in there. Because we all have day jobs, we all need to feed our families too. So we need to figure out a model where a builder, a developer can make a profit and can run an actual business and still serve the homeless population.
I was kind of glad to hear when we were talking before the show that you like living here in Salem and that you can walk here.
Yes.
And one of the things that kind of has caught my attention is the number of pedestrian deaths. And not just the deaths, but a lot of times people are fearful about crossing the streets. And I pointed this out to the City Council on a couple of occasions where they need to take this seriously, because it then makes it so that people don't want to walk across streets. They won't choose to take their feet or their bicycle to get someplace that is easily accessible that way. And they don't seem to understand that it is a serious issue. At least that's my impression. They don't seem to want to put that kind of effort into making sure that people feel safe walking downtown and around, basically around your ward. And I think that's, and maybe you've had some experience with this kind of situation about feeling very uncomfortable about crossing some of these streets.
It does get very tricky at times, at least once a week as I'm walking during my lunch hour or walking to work or to the mall or to the movie theater. I get cut off by a car, and they seem to feel a sense of ownership, like, what are you doing crossing my street? So yes, I agree, and parts of Salem don't even have sidewalks. There's only a gravel shoulder, and I have a 6-year-old at home, and it was not too long ago he was in a stroller, and some of those streets you can't walk with a stroller. As a pedestrian, I can walk on gravel because I'm able-bodied. But if I had a handicap, if I had a wheelchair, or I was visually impaired, I could not walk in a lot of neighborhoods in Salem. And that needs our attention, big time.
And one of the other things kind of related to that is the lack of bus service here in Salem. There's no evening bus service, and there's no weekend service. And what do you see the city's role in that situation? What can the city do maybe to help that along?
Well, obviously the transit district is a separate entity. I do believe the city can facilitate conversation, and I think I have seen different conversations taking place behind the scenes, and I'm hoping for some announcement soon of things happening. But I have been at meetings where I saw the business community in the same room with the transit folks, and I don't know what they're cooking up, but I'm excited to wait for it. But yes, we do need weekend service, we do need evening service. It's very unfortunate that the last ballot measure failed, but understandably too, and I don't want to offend anybody and get into that, but I think we all want the same thing. We all want a city that's livable. We all want a city that serves the diversity of the people, those who have a car, those who can't, those who can walk, those who need help walking. And currently there is quite a bit of room for improvement.
Well, I know that I moved to Salem with the idea that as you get older, your driving skills start to erode. And I didn't want to be in one of those situations where I was kind of cut off from doing things because I didn't trust my driving skills. And so I picked a neighborhood here in Salem which I can walk to a grocery store. I can walk to the Capitol, downtown. And so that was one of the reasons why I moved here, is because Salem did have a downtown, kind of, I wouldn't say it's the greatest downtown, but it's livable for the most part. And so I think that if we had decent transportation too, it might help alleviate some of the traffic problems we experience. And one of the examples that I've often thought about is that a lot of the traffic on the Third Bridge, for example, is just during the commute hours when it gets blocked up. why not have a commute bus from West Salem over to, say, downtown Salem and vice versa, so that people wouldn't necessarily have to drive across the bridge, that they would have an alternate transportation. And there's parking over there in West Salem and on this side where people could park if they needed to.
You know, I was very excited when I found out a couple months ago when the legislature was in session that they okayed funding for bus passes for state employees. That used to be one of the perks that fell away when the economy tanked, and the state just picked that up again. For those employees who want to take the bus to work, that they can leave their car at home. I walk, so I'm close enough that it makes no sense for me to take the bus. But I like the idea, because for one, living in the older neighborhood, I live in the Grand neighborhood, there were and still are quite a few state employees that park in front of our houses, clog up our streets, because they don't want to pay for parking downtown. And so there's a lot we can do to improve, and the bus pass, I think, is a step in the right direction. And the other thing we can do with buses is give them the right of way, similar to emergency vehicles when they approach a traffic light, it turns green just for them. So there's things we can do to give the bus preference, where people that take the bus can actually cross the bridge faster than if they took their car. So there's a lot of avenues that I would love to pursue.
Well, I believe down in the Springfield, Eugene area, they have what they call bus rapid transit. And the buses get a head start at the light, and they have priority.
Yes.
And that would, I think, kind of alleviate some of the problems that buses have getting in and out of traffic. And I really like the idea that you're thinking about those sorts of things, because we need something that's efficient for people to take.
Yes. And you know, like everything in life, there is lots of nuances and lots of details. One of the issues we have encountered in my neighborhood is that to put a bus stop on a street, you're also taking away parking, on-street parking spaces, which the older homes in my neighborhood were built around the 20s and the 30s, and a lot of our homes do not have off-street parking. Those houses were built before people had cars, so there's no garage. So people depend on the availability of a parking spot in front of the house. That's just part of living in an old neighborhood. So when you put a bus stop there and you take out 4 or 5 parking spots, that means women coming back from shopping during the day, having a little kid in tow, have to park possibly a block down. This is just one of the issues that we have to figure out too. It's not as easy as just to say, yeah, let's put a bus stop there and everybody will take the bus and we're fine. In my neighborhood, that is an issue too. Where do you take away the parking spaces? And what do you do with the people that live in the house right there who are used to parking there so you can take the groceries in, kid in tow, in the rain, that sort of thing. And so lots of details. And again, this is where the neighborhood associations come in. That's a great way. They live right there. They're the specialists on their own neighborhoods. And I would love to see closer cooperation between the city, the neighborhoods, the transit district, and all the other stakeholders.
Well, Jan, at this point we have a few minutes left, and I'd like for you to talk a bit about the issues that you want to address and what you think are important for the city of Salem.
Well, couple things come to mind, and I'll be quick. One thing that is not necessarily on everybody's radar is the property that's for sale, the former Oregon State Hospital. I believe it's 44 acres. That is a big, big chunk of land that could possibly be built on in the near future. So I would like, and that's right outside my ward. My ward ends 24th, 25th Street and starts right there. But you know, I can, in my mind, looking ahead a couple years, I can see where maybe some low-income housing could possibly be combined with some light commercial, maybe some restaurants, barbershops, those sorts of things, some light commercial. We have the chance to possibly build a really great, unique neighborhood over there. So that's one of the issues I'm sort of following from a distance at this point.
And that's not even your ward, but because really when you're elected to a ward, you have to make decisions for the whole city.
Yes.
I just kind of want to emphasize that, because that's something that people sometimes forget about.
Oh yes, very much. You don't just serve on city council and talk about your own issues. The decisions you make as a councillor affect everybody in the city to some extent. And yes, so this would be one of them. Just like the police facility, which happens to be in Ward 1, the O'Brien site, but obviously the police serves the entire city. Another issue is emergency preparedness. I'm very happy to see that there is a great emphasis on CERT, the Certified Emergency Response Team. The city has been reaching out to folks all over the city, doing little classes and helping people prepare for what if the earthquake destroys all little bridges. I live in walking distance, but I have to cross one bridge, walking distance to my office. One bridge, what if that bridge is down? Can I still get home? Well, folks that commute from South Salem to, say, the State Building may have to cross 3, 4, 5 bridges. So those are some things we need to think about when it comes to emergency preparedness. And then there's flooding. It's not just the earthquake. There's possible flooding. The city has done a lot of work towards mitigating some of the flooding. And I forgot what the term is called, when they, I guess, grade the creeks. And so we need to keep going down that road. There's still some properties that are very much flood prone, so that's something else we need to tackle.
Well, those are big ones because
Yes.
they affect people's lives.
Yes.
And I mean, like with an earthquake, you have no warning basically. And at least with flooding, you're kind of aware that the creek's rising or whatever.
Yes, it starts raining and raining and raining.
Yeah, you're aware that there could be a problem. But the earthquake is, for a long time, people here didn't even know that there were earthquakes because it had been so long since they had any kind of sizable one. Before, you know, basically 1700, I think, was when the last one hit. And they've discovered that it's like a 250-year or at the 300 and something year cycle that it goes through. And so it's an important issue because a lot of the buildings here haven't been built for that kind of eventuality. And now the flooding we're a little bit more used to. And there's been some things done in the meantime to kind of alleviate some of the heavy flooding. But, you know, there's still going to be occasions where we get a lot of rain and not enough time to deal with it. So those are some really big issues that a lot of people aren't aware of. But a lot of city government has to be prepared for this. And right now we have 2 buildings that aren't earthquake safe, and that's the library and the city hall.
Yes. And you know, I wish the conversations we have around these issues would be a little more nuanced, more detailed, because there's different earthquake codes, right? And we have a different, we will probably apply a different code to police than we will do to the library, and for obvious reasons. One is cost. And there's various degrees. It's not a yes, it is earthquake proof or no, it isn't, but there's various degrees of earthquake proofing.
Right.
Police, for example, they have to function after an earthquake, right?
And they're open 24/7.
Yes, and they if an earthquake hits, we need our cops more than ever. So they need a building that is up here with earthquake proofing, whereas the rest of the city facilities, that's my understanding, but I'm not an architect and I'm open to being educated. But there's an earthquake code that we apply that would not preserve the building, but people will get out alive. But that does not mean the building is usable afterwards. We have to think about that too. If we retrofit City Hall, it is great that all the staff can get out after an earthquake, but that does not mean the building is habitable afterwards. They will not be able to get back in.
Well, Jan, that's all the time we have for this episode. So I want to thank you for watching and good luck on your campaign and have a good evening.
Thank you for having me, Ken.